So we pitched Conversations with Chai to a couple of VCs and to a couple of investors. I want to share some of the learnings there because there were a lot of learnings and a lot of things that I was surprised with. If you're in content or if you're in music or if you're in creative and you're looking for outside investment, I would ask two things. And these are the things that VCs asked me.
It's Lil Baby.
Welcome to episode 69 of Conversations with Chai. I'm your host, Ram Chaudhary, aka Lil Baby Ram. And today we are going to go over the Adnan Syed case. We are going to go over whether you should be taking outside money for your media company or podcast. And I'm going to be giving some BTS on some of the things going on here at Conversations with Chai. I want to start today by saying, obviously, like Ramadan Mubarak to all my Muslims out there that are fasting and participating. This is my first time fasting while doing this full time, and I'm feeling a lot of gratitude. On the train ride over here, I was like going to complain and be like, oh, like sometimes it's like, you know, you get that brain fog when you're like fasting and you like can't think through like complex things. But I was just also thinking about how grateful I was for I would say like very simple things. Like I think about like in my week, I'm able to like, if I am having that brain fog, I'm able to like move things around because I own my own company and say, hey, you know what? Like I can do this like after I've broken my fast, or hey, I can like wake up like a little bit later and stay up a little bit later to work out. And I just think about like that flexibility. And I like think about all like my brothers and sisters out there that are working like laborious jobs to provide for their families, and they don't really have that privilege. So I really think like I'm feeling real grateful this year. Among like for a lot of other reasons too. This Ramadan came at a very interesting time for me, which I'll kind of get into like later with kind of some of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes for Conversations with Chai. And I'm like, it's crazy. Like even simple things, like I was able to just like go to Jummah today, right? And that was like something when I was like in corporate, like I really didn't have that opportunity to like step away and like kind of build my routine and schedule the way that I would want it to be. And that right there kind of really highlights one of the many reasons that I like absolutely love this. Sometimes like I think especially now when, you know, you kind of complain like, oh, this business isn't like moving enough and it's not moving enough. And then finally it's moving and it's moving very fast. And you can sometimes like get caught up in like, oh, wow, like I'm like working all the time, which it kind of does feel like I am. But it's also like at the end of the day, like I control like my workflow. And that to me is like, you can't put a price on that. I mean, I guess you could. It's whatever people take for corporate money. But you really can't put a price on that to say, hey, like I have this going on today, or hey, I want to work on this today. And then being able to just work on that, or being able to say, hey, this is not worth my time today, and say, hey, I'm not going to work on it. So just things like that. I am really, you know, special shout out to all my brothers and sisters fasting in Palestine and like all over the world in places that it's even more difficult to fast. Obviously, you know, like there's so many outside things that people can't control. And in this blessed month, I know like a lot of folks want to, you know, focus on their deen and like focus on like becoming closer to God. And I think it's admirable that people are doing it with such externalities that are so wild to me to even think about. Like I can't imagine trying to fast, but you haven't even gotten real food in the last like week. It's truly, I think about it and I like think about how, you know, like I think like coming to the West and like being brown, like you overlook the fact that like outside of just like being born in a different place or having a different set of parents, just like small variables, like life could have been like so different. And sometimes I have to like pause and think about how privileged a life I live. And it's like, you know, like you can't stop there and say like, oh, like I'm privileged and just kind of just harp on that, right? Like you do have to continuously like work and feel grateful for it. But it is, I think, like important sometimes to reflect on that privilege and then understand what am I doing with that. I think that that's like something that I think a lot of people in our generation probably feel some way about, because I know that a lot of us do feel a lot of like, sometimes some of us will feel guilt because we're like, hey, like, how are we complaining about this going on in my life when there's these things going on in the world? And other times we're like, oh, like, how am I doing this when there's these things going on in the world? But I do think it is a balancing act at all times, right? Because to diminish your own struggles and your own battles is not something that is conducive to you existing, and it's not something that's, I don't think, productive. But I think this Ramadan has brought me like a lot of it's cut down the noise a lot for me. I think I was kind of getting into the zone of like, with everything going on with the company, I've been in work mode and I've kind of been in like a winter season. But obviously with Ramadan, even like taking out just like something as simple as like food, I now even have more hours on the day where I'm thinking about like, hey, I don't have to think about food in this moment. I can just, work, or I can focus on my prayers. And that to me is something that I've been like truly, truly grateful for. And I'm like really excited to like lean into this coming month. So, so let's get into it. I guess I want to start with the Adnan Syed case. So for those unfamiliar, Adnan Syed's case was covered by the podcast Serial. So it's a Serial and now many other documentaries post Serial, but it was the first Serial podcast documentary case. And Adnan Syed was convicted of murdering his girlfriend at the time. And he was just recently, basically he was let go, and recently a judge said that he served his entire sentence. And there was a lot of backlash from it. And for those unfamiliar with the case, I would definitely like look into it. There's so many docs. You can rewatch or re-listen to Serial. I think it's interesting because obviously, like, first of all, like, thoughts and prayers to like both Adnan's family and Hoi Min Lee's, because I think it's unfortunate, because I think anybody who says, because there's podcasts and there's documentaries that exist, that they know what happened, I think is just an arrogant stance to take. I know that the family maintains that it was Adnan was guilty of the crime that he committed, and Adnan and his family have both maintained that he was not. I think that there's two ways to, I believe, like, look at it, right? You can either say, hey, I have an opinion, but you can't say that you know. And then B, if you trust the justice system as it is in the US, whether you do or whether you don't, if you're putting the case in the hands of that, then you have to kind of accept whatever comes of that. So we're now looking at, hey, he served 20 plus years, and now the US legal system is saying he has served his full time. And even while the case was going on, there's a lot of folks that were saying, hey, this case has a lot of reasonable doubt attached to it. And in that, I think if we're, going by the US legal system, there's a lot of people that were saying like he probably shouldn't have been convicted. Now, it's me personally, like, I have no idea, right? Like, I've listened to Serial, I've watched a couple docs on it, but I think that the whole doc culture has people thinking that they know something that they don't. Like, you are not on the case, you're not in the case. And I think it's unfortunate. I hope that Adnan now in his freedom is able to come out and contribute to society in a meaningful way. And I do hope that people do give him the chance to do that, because right now I think there's like a lot of like, oh, like, what else did you want out of this horrible scenario from him, right? Like, is it that you want to see him reincarcerated for a different crime? Because if we're saying, hey, we're trusting the legal system and this was the outcome, then this was the outcome. It's tough. I definitely think for his family and him, right? Like, it's definitely a sigh of relief, right? Like, I know his mother, him have been kind of, obviously like going through this for the last 20 plus years. And it's like, he basically did serve his life, right? He went in at 18 and now he's in his 40s. But but I do hope that he's able to come out and contribute in a meaningful way, right? And I hope that the family is able to find peace on both sides, right? So the last couple of months, so you guys obviously got to see the most recent pod come out with Saad this week, right? And I haven't really been able to share anything about what the behind the scenes of the pod has been going on for a lot of reasons. A, because I wasn't comfortable doing it, but I've said it on the pod. I am willing to burn everything down for this pod, and I'm willing to like go to like my last dollar. And I truly did. I think like in January of this year, like I was like looking at like the business and I was looking at my personals. Cause like, again, I don't really separate out like the personal finances and the business finances of this. I look at them as the same. If I have $100, the business has $100. If I have $1,000, the business has $1,000, because anytime I have money, it kind of just goes into the investment of this business. And for good or for worse, I'm not going to get into like whether that's like practical. Like we're not in practicality land here, right? Like if I was being practical, this pod would have ended like months ago. This business would not exist. But I have to live in the delusion of this dream because I can't tell myself any different. Otherwise we're cooked here, right? Like there's no pod. Like these things like don't make sense. I think like any podcaster, any person who has a startup, like it comes out of delusion. But to kind of get to the point, like in January, like I realistically did not know how this was going to continue forward financially. I was in a place where I was like, my business was all messed up. And, you know, we had to kind of like get creative, right? Like we went to the once a week pod format. We went to the solo pod format kind of out of necessity. Like, yes, was it good for the brand and good for the business? Yes. Was it ideal though for when and how we executed it? Probably not. But in that process, so January, I'm looking at, you know, and we're kind of cooked. And I get, you know, I kind of just like go into like full monk mode. I go retract everything back from the business, kind of just focus on the core essentials of this business, right? I maintain like, hey, we have a pod schedule. Not as consistent as I'd like it to be, but we're staying as consistent as we can. Then I go straight to figuring out what is our business model. So I looked at our last year's financials and I'm looking at, hey, where did our money come from? What do we actually do? And I think focusing in on that, it came with a twofold experience. I think people always talk about being like grateful for what you have and being grateful for money. And I think that's like easy to say, like, oh, I'm so grateful for what I have. But I think you don't really feel real gratitude without the experience of not having. Because I used to like, I used to make good money at Amazon. Like I was young. I didn't really have bills to pay. I don't got kids to feed. Like I was making good money. But even when I was making that money, I kept telling myself, oh, I don't have enough money. Like if somebody would ask me like, oh, like, why can't you do this? It's like, I don't got enough money. And it was this like scarce mindset of like, I don't have enough money, which is crazy to think now. Because at that time, I'm like making good money. I'm like making top percentile money for like my age bracket in the US. And I'm still telling myself that I don't have enough money. And that to me was, I think, the biggest mistake I made. Because I kept being so scarce. Like I was like, oh, I don't have money. And then I truly felt the experience of not having any money. And that to me was the best experience. Because A, it forced me to get stupid creative. B, it just forced me to lock in. Because when your bread is not there, you're looking at every single decision you make as, should I be doing this? Can I be doing this? And that got me to really prioritize what it is that I'm doing. I can't keep saying that, this is my main focus and this is what I'm building. When I see my monthly books, it better reflect that. Like if I say that this is the most important thing to me, my financials better reflect that. And if it doesn't, then we're not really serious here. And I think that experience kind of gave me a lot of gratitude for the money that did come in for the pod. What up, Wolf? I think getting the experience of like, hey, this is what the business operated with no capital. And then finally, when we got that capital, feeling real grateful for it, feeling real like, hey, we got bread in for this podcast. We got bread in for this business. And I truly felt the deepest sense of gratitude. Like when that check hit the account, where I was finally like, you know what? I could breathe. I could just breathe a little bit. I felt I like almost cried straight up. Like I like called my mom, like I called my girl, I called my dad, and I like dead ass was like on the verge of tears because I truly felt what struggle felt like. And now that, and you know what? It's crazy because out of all that creativity, all of that learning, now having a little war chest, I'm like, oh, this is now like not easy, but I figured out what to do with nothing. Now, if I have a little something and I have a lot more than that, I'm able to do so much now. And it just felt so good because it's like, yo, I didn't get that check and just go buy some Jordans. I didn't get that check and like go buy like a fit for myself or go buy myself a chain, which is what I would have done like 5 years back. Because now my dad used to always say it, like, you gotta, I'm sure every dad has said this, like, you gotta really understand the value of the dollar. I used to think I understood what that meant. Now I really understand what that means. Like now I really understand what that dollar means. I understand what that dollar is able to do. Now I'm able to look at that dollar and be like, you know what, this dollar could be like $10 or this dollar could be $1,000 if I do the right things with it. Or it could be a gold chain. It was a real cool experience. And I'm only comfortable like now talking about it. I feel like because we've turned the corner. Let me knock on wood real quick. It feels like turning the corner because I'm like, hey, like now, I think like last year we burned so much money on this podcast, just not knowing what the business model was. Because I think like a lot of people get it confused, like, hey, and you know, we're going to announce a couple things like very, very soon for this. But I think a lot of people look at this as like, hey, the podcast is the business. This is so much more than just a podcast. Like this podcast lends itself to a lot of different opportunities and a lot of different revenue streams that we have now finally figured out. But in that process, so something for the audience that I thought, I guess like one of the things that we definitely wanted to get into was in that moment, I finally, for the first time, because I hold such care for this because it truly is my baby. And sometimes I'm selfishly attached to it, where I've never really ever considered bringing on partners, bringing on investors. But out of pure necessity this time, we finally hit the block and tried to raise some bread. And that was a incredibly learning and humbling experience. So we pitched Conversations with Chai and Chai Collective, our larger business, to a couple of VCs and to a couple of investors. And I want to share some of the learnings there because there were a lot of learnings and a lot of things that I was surprised with. I think the first thing that I was kind of surprised by, so we went in, we pitched our company, we pitched all of the things that we do as a company. And there was a lot of focus on my end on trying to show profit and revenue, which is what I think that people care about. Which, you know, if you're in a traditional business, I think that's important. But I think most investors understand what I think even most startup founders understand, which is early on, you're really not trying to make money because you're not going to make so much money. I think that's what a lot of people who say that they want to do, whether it's podcasting or whether it be creative, I think that's like a mistake that we all make. I think that everybody has this approach of like, hey, I'm going to make money podcasting and then I'm going to reinvest in a camera and then I'm going to reinvest in a mic and then I'm going to reinvest in a studio. And Is that possible? Yes. But I think a big thing that I realized is that capital just kind of expedites it all. And if you're short on capital and you're recording Zooms to launch your podcast, or you're just recording your podcast on your phone or using a Yeti mic, that's fine. But something about that entire pod or that entire company has to be extraordinary for you to scale at that level. Because what money are you making in from there? I think when Saad said this on the most recent podcast, he said he hates the idea of slashies because he's like, I don't want somebody who works part-time on the creative or on their business and then works their 9 to 5. And I disagreed on the premise of, hey, like people should have hobbies, but if you're trying to do this as a business, unless you're taking every dollar you're making from your 9 to 5 into that business, there's no point in realistically scaling like that because you're not going to. If you're looking at like, hey, I'm going to only reinvest the money that I make from my creative content into my creative content, it's a very difficult and slow build. And I think that's where I didn't really have that thinking, honestly, because I punted in a lot of my own money into doing this. But the VC conversations, I think like when you talk about like profit, it's kind of like a moot point because how much profit are you really making doing something that is a 5-year build? Like, it's a 5-year build. Like if you're doing podcasting or like media or content or anything creative, like if you're an artist, if you're a musician, at minimum, it's a 5-year build. Like at minimum, for you to make any type of like decent money that an investor would care about, it's a 5-year build. And at that point, you don't really need the investor money because you'll be making enough money to actually make some plays. Will you need investor money to like 10x that? 10x that? Yes. But you don't really at that point need the money. But I think that conversation, I think like you want to be able to show growth, right? If you're in the physical goods business, like you want to show growth in top line revenue, fuck profit. Damn, I tried really hard to not curse during Ramadan, but if you're doing physical goods, obviously like you're trying to increase top line revenue, so you can show, hey, look, we're showing growth. But if you're in content or if you're in music or if you're in creative and you're looking for outside investment, I would ask 2 things. And these are the things that VCs asked me. A, how are you showing growth? So for us, it was the VC literally asked me, he was like, yo, just pull up your YouTube studio. So I pulled up my YouTube studio. I had to show, are we improving on any of the metrics that YouTube is tracking? If you're a content creator, are you improving in any of the metrics that Instagram is tracking or is TikTok tracking? Is your watch time improving? Are your number of subs improving? Is your number of hours watched improving? Because that is actually the indicator of success. Growth. Like if you're growing or if you're improving, then they have something to say like, hey, this could be something in a year or 2 years. Because I think when you talk about investors, they don't care. Like I was really I was stretching to show profit last year. Like I was like, oh, like if I want VC money, like I got to show them profit. And I'm like stretching to figure it out. And at the end of the day, bro, they're about to write you a check for like 100,000, 500,000, whatever the investment is. If they're investing that much money with you, they don't care whether they see $5,000 as a return. That's a horrible investment for them. So what they care about is when you're able to take your company and sell it for $5 million. So then they could take their percentage off of that. Like that. And if you're going to eventually say, hey, I'm going to sell this company for 5 million or 50 million or whatever that number is, you got to show the growth in the first 3 years. And I think that like I'm glad that we had a lot of those VC conversations because it really changed the strategy for this podcast and this business. Another thing, and I can't really justify it, but I'm gonna justify it to you guys. Another thing we do as a business, as an entity, I do a lot. I do the podcast. I'm doing creative services on the side. I'm doing business consulting. He looked at my slide deck and was like, yo, which of these three makes the most money? And then which of these three will make the most money? And if the answer doesn't overlap, you got a problem. He's like, you can't be the best at all three of these verticals. You can't be the best business consultant. You can't be the best podcast. And you can't be the best creative services. So pick one. Now, what I didn't tell him that I will tell you is that I'm like, yo, I can't. There's two things. I can't justify not investing in these other verticals because those verticals are bringing in the revenue for me to invest in this. Like this podcast, out of all the things I do, has the highest ceiling. But it's the longest build because nobody is writing me a real check for this today. Like the real check that I want out of this is a one-time check when you really think about it. Like, did Rogan and Joe Budden, did they all make small checks here and there from ad spots? Yes. But the real check, the Spotify, the Netflix, came in like year 3. That's the real check. Like that's like the one where it's like, oh, like this was what the build was for. The small advertising checks, that just barely cover your overhead here. This shit is expensive. Making content, like making great content is expensive. Like that's what people really don't realize is that a lot of like, I see y'all out there. I see y'all out there trying to fill the gig. Because I think a lot of y'all think that the gig is, oh, I'm going to just have a mic and talk, or I'm going to have my phone and talk. That is not the gig. The gig is so much more than that. If you think that that's the gig, that's page 1 of the book. You got to read the rest of the book. I think people get it twisted and they think like, oh, if I just have a mic, but to have great quality content, it takes money. It takes investment. It takes time and sweat equity if you don't have money. And I think people have oversimplified things like podcasting into, I'm just going to record on a mic and I'm going to talk and somebody's going to listen. That's not the game we're in anymore. That was the game back in like 2013 when podcasting didn't exist basically and nobody was doing it. Like, look at the early Joe Budden podcast or look at the early Joe Rogan podcast. There's no video or the video sucks and the audio quality is like meh. It's like 4 dudes in a room talking. That was 2013. And today, it's not the case. The algorithm is unforgiving. The algorithm is unforgiving. I don't mean that in the typical boohoo cry, oh, the algorithm don't like me type of way. There's great quality content out there. YouTube is the new television. YouTube and Netflix are the new television. So if you look at what TV was, like look at a produced show, like late night TV. That's the new podcast. So if your podcast or whatever you're doing in content does not look like that, you're never going to get and command those types of dollars. Like this needs to look and sound like Jimmy Fallon did like 5 years ago. That's the reality of what we're in. Because if people are watching YouTube and Spotify as if they're channels, the content better match that. And you know, like I'm gonna leave this up to the YouTube nerds. Like shout out to Colin and Samir. If you're in the content game, definitely give that podcast a listen. Colin and Samir have an incredible podcast, but This is for the YouTube nerds, but just think about it from a very simple perspective, right? YouTube, when it first started, was like videos of anything, like cats, I don't know, cats eating chocolate or whatever it is. But today, look at your For You page on YouTube. See what's actually on there. They're probably suggesting some high-level content because the low-level content doesn't get pushed at all. And I think the conversations with investors is that they see that too. They see YouTube as the new TV. So they want channels. They want channels. Like your YouTube channel is like ABC, or you should be looking at it as it's ABC or it's NBC. That's what like if you're really serious about this, that's what you need to look at it as. Because if you want that type of investment or you want to take it to that type of level, that is what it is. It was a good learning experience, and I don't know if like we did not end up taking VC money for like a lot of reasons. One, I don't think we're there yet. I have to know what I'm doing with this money. I need to make sure that my process is efficient. I think when you put up your own money, you're allowed to make more mistakes because it's your money. B, I think that control is still a big thing that I know I talked about at the front of the pod, right? Like control is like a big thing for me, especially when it's like regarding my business. As soon as you have investors, you have somebody to answer to. It may not be your boss, but you have somebody to answer to. You got to return the check at some point. So right now, I don't think we're there yet. In a year from now and maybe 6 months from now, if I know, this is exactly what I'm going to do with this money, it may be a different conversation. But right now, I think the focus for us is making sure, I think year one, we figured out the business model. For me, this year is making that business model efficient. Like I know now what our business does. Now it's about doing that so much better. Like that was like, I think about what we were doing last year and I'm like, we were floundering a lot. And that's fine. That's exploration. But now that I have an idea of what the business model is, we can finally start tweaking things. And that's what we've been doing. And honestly, getting to focus in and I'm so grateful for the people that I've been able to do business with that have been able to put checks into my pockets so I can now do things and hopefully expand this business. Like, thank you. If you've done any business with me, thank you. Because that check is not going to get me a gold chain. That check is going right here to make this product better for you. So if you're listening and there's some business that we could do, hit me. Like, understand, like off the strength, A, we will do a good job, and B, that money will not be wasted. That money will be coming right here to give you better products and better moments. And man, I wish I could share with y'all what I'm cooking up. Like, not even for me, bro. Like, this is not from a place of ego. Like, I want to have such a booming business because to me, every time I make $1, it's not just me making $1. So many people are getting paid. That to me is like what really gets me excited now. Like that to me is like the most hype thing. Like, 3 months into 2025, we've done literally 80% of our revenue from last year. And that gets me so excited. Revenue. Notice I didn't say profit. Because back last year, whenever we were making money, I was just most of it keeping or reinvesting here. Now, bro, I'm able to bring in dollars, pay people, put bread into people's pockets, and put out better products for y'all. Man, like that to me is what gets me excited, right? Like, it's like every time I'm able to take in a contract and then I'm able to pay a photographer, pay a videographer their rate, not negotiate with them, pay them their rate, then pay the editors their rate. That's what gets me excited. I'm all like, I put real dollars in real places. That's what gets me so excited about this. Man, soon come. I will share what we really have cooking over here. I think kind of moving on. I kind of want to get into something that has to be like a New York thing, and it's like really been like pissing me off. only in New York do people feel comfortable coming to you and asking you, what's your deal? Like, I'll be in certain rooms and conversations, and then out of nowhere, somebody instead of just having a regular human to human conversation, they just need to know what you do. And I'm really bad about like the whole self-promotion thing. Like, I try not to, unless we're like talking about the pod and from like a business perspective, and like we're kicking game back and forth, or we have business to do, I don't feel the need to ever say what I do. Like, I don't feel the need to say, oh, I have a podcast or I have a media company. Like, maybe that's to my detriment. That's just not what I want to talk to people about on the daily. Like most people, your average person, like obviously, like if I'm standing next to Ani, I'm talking shop, because if you're standing next to Michael Jordan, you're going to talk basketball. Like, that's just what it is. But like for your average conversation, your regular human being, I just want to have a regular human being conversation. Like New York, everybody kind of just introduces themselves and what they do. And like, you know, that's like cool in terms of like when it's appropriate and like the point is connecting and building. But for me, that's not really most of the time why I'm having conversations. It's just not. It's like, I don't really go anywhere to network. Like if we talk and we kick it and then we find out later we do something that overlaps and we could work together, incredible. But most of the times, that's not really the conversation. Like, T's in the studio with me, right? Like, again, we have regular conversations, but if T thinks like, hey, this person could help you, that's it. That's like the extent of the conversation. Like if Wolf's here and like Wolf's like, yo, this person I think would be a good connect for you to have, that's the extent of our business conversation. Outside of that, it's mostly regular conversations. And I think I think like New York has this, like everybody has it in their Instagram bio, like what they do. And they think that that's like the best way to promote. I think the best way to promote is just create quality product and create meaningful relationships outside of what you do. Because if you got meaningful relationships, the right people and the right business will come to you. I've never like promoted my business and be like, yes, have I DM'd people and asked them to be on the pod and stuff? Yes. But that's like the purpose of that. But if I'm meeting to you at like a social event, I just want to talk. Tell me what you ate for that day. Tell me how much you love your wife. Tell me something. Tell me what you think about like the ongoing conflicts in the world. Like, I don't know, like anything. Because to me, that's more interesting than just hearing what it is that you do. Especially when what it is that you do may be done at like a mediocre level. No offense. I love y'all. But I think it's just like so irritating to me. I like go to certain rooms and I'm like, it's so funny. The funniest thing is like when people talk to you and they know what you do, but they're trying to get you to say what you do so they can then finesse it into something or the other that they're promoting. Like, I just play dumb. I'm like, I have no idea. They'll be like, oh, like, do I know you from somewhere? Nope. Like, unless you want to ask me or you truly, again, that's not to say if you truly like a fan of the pod, absolutely. Let's chop it up. Like, I want to hear if you had a question about something, absolutely here for that. But if it's just to talk about what we do, I'm good off of that, truly and honestly. Oh, I had someone ask me, they said, if somebody was bad at their craft, would you tell them? And I thought about it honestly, because my first thought was, I looked at them, I was like, wait, are you asking me that because you need to tell me something? Because if you do, please do. And then I thought about it a little bit more deeply and seriously. And my answer was yes. But it's subjective, right? Whether somebody's bad at their craft. Like I think about like certain like artists and musicians and even podcasters. If they're bad at their craft, that's an opinion, right? Like nobody is like objectively. Can you be objectively bad at something creative? Like you think somebody can just be an objectively bad podcaster?
Yes, only because sometimes when you're objectively bad, this is how you could do it. You just come in and you just don't keep any audience in mind. I think that you're objectively bad when you do that. You're just like literally thinking about yourself.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's because when somebody asks like what you would tell somebody, hey, like are they bad at their craft? I think about like I think about it from like a music perspective, right? Where somebody like if you don't hit the right audience, like it could be bad to me, but like great to somebody else. Like I've heard some shit and I've been like, oh, this is trash. But then that person, like whether down the line, has amassed a fan base.
Yeah, that's true.
So then, like, because it got me to think, it's like if somebody, I don't want to ever derail somebody from what they're doing by saying, hey, this is bad. When if you went down this path further, you may have stumbled upon your audience.
Yeah, I know what you mean though. Then, so objectively, they could be objectively bad with room for improvement. Like they're like, this is bad. This is coming off terribly. But if they change some things, then they're on the right track.
I think, yeah. And I think that's the conclusion that I kind of came to. I was like, I would never tell somebody that they were bad at something and stop doing it. Mm-hmm. If you truly want to make music, I'm no one to tell you, yo, you're bad at this and stop making it. Mm-hmm. But I do think that feedback, whether you take it or not, is always an act of love. Mm-hmm. Like, I think if you give somebody feedback, that's like love, right? Like, because it's like, hey, I heard this, I truly thought about it, and this is my honest opinion. Take it or leave it, because who the fuck am I? But that is my honest opinion, right? And I think like that to me, like when somebody asked, I was like, because I hope that my friends and family or even my audience, if somebody's like listening to this and they think, hey, this could be better this way, I would hope that somebody would hit me and tell me. Because I think like the worst thing is when somebody is truly trying to do something and they get no feedback and they are objectively bad and nobody tells them. Because then it's like a vicious cycle of, hey, I'm doing this for 5-7 years, not changing a thing, and there's no benefit or there's nothing coming from this. And I have a goal here. It's tricky because like I think about like how many people, like if somebody told me like I was objectively bad, that's not getting me to stop, right? Because I'm just gonna be like, fuck you, like, and I think that's like most people's take. Like most people who truly feel strongly in their craft, they're going to say, hey, I'm going to do this. Will I figure it out? Yes, right? But I'm going to continue doing this for a while. I just thought that was hilarious. I was like, I immediately like started hitting up my friends. And yo, if you're my friends and family, or if you somebody who love me and you think that there's something we can improve, tell me. I will not take it personally. Like I am a student here. I want to wrap up with a couple like, I guess like fun. Whoa.
What the hell?
Are we good?
Yeah, everything is still on, but what was that?
That was tweaking.
All right.
Yo.
Hey,
that was scary.
Yeah.
Wait, everything's on though, right?
Yeah.
I want to end with a couple recaps of things that we have had, things that we have coming up. So you guys obviously saw the Sod podcast that came out this past week. It was my first time being back in the studio after like 2 weeks, so was super excited to do it. Sod came up and said a lot of fire, dropped a lot of game. I thought, artists, managers, I know y'all are listening. If y'all don't think nobody listens to this, just know that people behind the scenes be having reactions to what is set up here. Because we got, I wouldn't call it backlash, but there's people had words based off of the pod. And, people have opinions and things like that, and that's fine. But I always say, like, yo, you can hit me and you can hit the guest, but always keep it respectful. I just think it's crazy, though, to sometimes hear the impact. And when we talk about impact over numbers, that's what I mean. Like, you could point to our numbers and say whatever, right? But impact is when artists or managers or whoever are hitting people based off of what's set up here. This another, I guess, like recap thing. The Simone Ashley clips came out from the Picture This premiere. If you haven't watched Picture This, definitely go out on Amazon Prime right now. Very, very cool opportunity. Shout out to Trisha, shout out to Brown Girl Mag for allowing me to be a part of that night. I thought it was an interesting experience. I won't lie, and this is not like, please don't misconstrue this as shade. I thought the Simone Ashley interview, so the clips that came out, we chopped up what we could out of that, but I thought a lot of the answers felt very safe. And I think, that's not Simone's fault. Simone was an incredible guest. She was incredibly nice and kind. But I do think when you're in that, about to make it to this next level, she's about to start doing crazy types of movies. I think she's in this like very safe and media trained zone where her answers were very just safe. Like it didn't give a lot of, I don't know, it didn't like give a lot. Cause I tried, guys. Like I want people to know that like whatever y'all saw of the clips, like I asked some questions that I was hoping got some real meat out of. Like I hope we got some like real like context and we got some real stuff out of. And I probed here and there, but it was tough. It's like a 10-minute interview. And I still tried to squeeze some stuff in, right? Because like that's the stuff that I care about, right? Like I think like those like viral, quick TikTok ready interview questions, like that's not really my bag, right? Like I really want to get to know like why you got into acting and who you hate and all of that. Like that to me is like why we do this, right? Like I want to get real. I'm never gonna say that I'm a journalist, but I do want to get some real stuff out of you that I can't just like ask you and you've given the same answer 15 times. And you know, I get it, right? Like she has a lot of big companies and brands around her. So you can't say anything that could be misconstrued as maybe a way, right? Like you just have to stay safe if you're in Simone Ashley's position. So I absolutely understand that. But it was a cool experience because I kind of got to see, it was my first time getting to see like a Hollywood-esque celebrity up close like that and seeing how their teams kind of move around them. And it kind of got me thinking, I was like, I kind of like my ability to do whatever the fuck it is. And I truly value that. And I think like when you go into that, like that level of celebrity, it becomes more and more difficult because you have so many more and more managers, handlers, business partners that are all kind of like, hey, do this, don't do that. Like that comes very apparent, I guess, like the more fame you get. But on the flip side, there are people that, you know, whether it be actors, whether it be business owners that kind of still do whatever the fuck it is that they want, right? So I really think it kind of is dependent on the person and how you have your business set up. But very, very cool experience nonetheless, right? And please don't misconstrue this as hate, please. Next, by the time this comes out, you'll have seen it. Our Purna J interview came out and man, what a woman. Like, what a woman, first of all. Like, she just oozes cool. Like, she just pulled in the craziest fit, cool as hell. Loved our conversations. For me, it was huge. Y'all know I got a podcast hit list of guests that I want on. She was like the top 4, which is going to be on the post that comes out or has came out. But man, like, love that interview. She was just super cool. I need her to come back and please tag her in this. I need her to come up and do like a full podcast because man, fire. She did that obviously in promotion of Deli Boys. Deli Boys out now. Watch that, stream that. As of this recording, it's like top 12 on Hulu streaming right now. Keep running that up. Let that go to number 1, please. Because man, talk about like just the cast, Purna, like Sheikh, like all of them, right? Even the team behind the scenes, Abdullah, the writer, right? Shout out to Sarawar and Tamid, right? From third place. Because man, the team behind it, like big New York, big ups, stream that because I watched the first 5 episodes. It's what I want out of representation. I don't want representation where it's like, so easily focused, like, oh, they're brown and that's the plot. That show, even if you're not brown, is hilarious. It just happens to be that the entire cast is brown. And that to me is what I want out of representation. Give me a great piece of art and let the representation be in the background of it just because the people are brown. Not like, man, it was huge for me, getting to interview Purna, even for like a quick, I was like lucky enough because I really thought that was going to be like a 5-minute interview. The full interview ended up being like 20 minutes. She was super cool, sat down with us, gave us like extra time. just oozed aura. And man, like, think about, like, she didn't really take credit for it the way that I think that she should, but I'm going to for her. What a trailblazer. Like, that word gets thrown around a lot, but what a career. Like, what a career. She told me that she started acting in her 30s and she's built out this illustrious career where she's so recognizable. She's put together such great and memorable roles. Big shout out to Purna. Next week, we got some of the contestants of Desi Dating, Pop Chef's Desi Dating. We got a couple of the participants coming on. We're going to talk all things of the show. We're going to talk all things love and relationship and things that maybe stemmed from the show. So super excited for that. That's going to be coming out in a week. But yo, fam, super, super excited. Appreciate y'all listening. As always, subscribe, hit me. Love y'all. Thank y'all for listening. Peace.